All right. Where and when were you born?
Ah, that was in London on the 31st of January 1926.
And that makes you a Capricorn. And do you
Uh,
identify?
no, actually, I'm an Aquarius.
Ah, okay, great. Do you identify with being an Aquarian in any way? It certainly is a visionary sign.
I think so. I think so because I've got a lot of other things in Aquarius too.
And what traits do you identify with?
Sorry, what's that word?
What Aquarian? In what ways are you an Aquarian?
Oh, I think just general curiosity.
Curiosity. Okay, Lee, if
I
you
don't, I don't know too much about it. I mean, I don't take it seriously.
right. I'm asking people to take the Myers Briggs personality type. Do you by chance know
Oh,
yours?
yes. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm afraid I don't know anything about it. So, I mean, if you want to ask me questions that,
I'll send you the link, and they have questions that you can do online. What about your birth order? Are you in
oh,
terms of your
yes, I have
sibling?
an older brother, nearly 5 years older.
So you're the second of two.
That's right.
Um, what was there about your family that led you to go to Oxford? Was that your undergraduate university?
Yes, it was.
And
Yes. Oh,
especially
yes, my parents were ambitious for me, yes.
why? Because in those days it wasn't usual for a girl or young woman to become a barrister.
Well, I didn't have in mind being a barrister. I read English at Oxford. I think that was simply because, well, to be honest, I was good at it and I found it easy. I had really wanted to go into science, but I had even then weakness in the eyes and was advised that I must only do something I found very easy and not work for too many hours a day. I'm afraid that made it English.
Mm. Did you go to boarding school like most
Yes.
other? And I talked to Susan Blackmore, who said it was a terrible experience. It was like being in prison with all the rules and regulations. Did you find it
Oh,
that way or not?
no, no, not at all. I quite enjoyed it.
Because it was academically stimulating?
Sorry, what was that?
Why did you enjoy it?
Um, well, I think I expected to enjoy it. You see, I read things that my older brother had read, and that included a lot of schoolboy stories, and it all sounded great fun. So I was expecting to enjoy it, and yes, I did. I suppose I don't mind a few rules and regulations. I probably broke a lot of them.
um,
I,
when you were in Oxford, what percentage of the students were women? I'm thinking that it was fairly unusual.
well, we were a minority. There were four or five, the fifth was just coming into existence, colleges specifically for women, and they didn't attend any of the men's colleges. And so we were a minority, but it wasn't so peculiar as all that. They did expect us to join in societies and go to choirs and orchestras and so forth. I mean, they were very pleasantly undergraduates.
Got it.
Yeah.
What was your family's religious spiritual orientation? Were they Church of England?
Not really, no. My parents were actually brought up Jewish, but they didn't like it at all. They were very anti-religion, and though they never talked about religion to me or to my brother, they sent us to schools that were certainly Church of England foundations. I think they just wanted us to be completely English. perhaps I should explain they were Americans, came from America, settled in England, and wanted really to bring up completely English children.
Wait,
They did.
what was the Wait, can you lean back a little bit? I think it makes the mic fuzzy. Yeah. So what was the America connection?
What was,
You mentioned America.
how did I become a barrister? Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
You mentioned that they had an American connection, your parents.
Yes, they both came from New York. My father was very keen to be thoroughly English, and in fact, he's one of the few Americans I've ever known who spoke pure English. You would never have known that he was anything else. And he just wanted just to be normal English children.
If you
I mean, to be honest, I never believed a word of any religion ever, but I enjoyed singing hymns and songs, and I loved the language of the Bible. So, that was my religious upbringing. It was really more musical than anything.
I need you to lean back so that you're not so close to the mic. Yes, much better.
Okay. That's more comfortable for me, actually.
Oh, good. And then how did you get from reading English to being a barrister?
Well, again, it was rather by mistake, because we were doing a lot of house hunting. We were moving from the country back to London, and I got so intrigued with people's houses, going around them, I decided I wanted to be an estate agent and spend my life going around other people's houses. And the first thing you do if you're going to qualify under the RICS, which is the top brand, is to have a lot of lectures on law. And I enjoyed that very much. Of course, I was doing building instruction too. But we were friendly with the county court judge, and he said, "Oh, my dear, you don't want to do law at the West London College of Commerce. No, you want to join Gray's Inn and be a proper barrister." And so I took his advice, and that's why I became a barrister. And I realized then that I really didn't know any of the sort of stuff that I needed to be an estate agent. And so that's how I became a barrister. You see how very accidental my life has been. Intended for science, did English because I was advised, fell into being a barrister because our friend the judge told me that was the way to read law. Mm-hmm. And it was a good choice.
And did you meet a husband along the way?
No, I never did. It never quite coincided. The one I wanted and the one who wanted me, but they were never the same.
Oh, interesting.
So no partner, no.
Then how did you get interested to the point where you became president of the Oxford Society for Psychical Research?
Well, again, following my older brother, he was very keen on ghost stories and anything that we would call paranormal. And indeed, I think when I first heard about, what Christine called the Holy Ghost, I was very intrigued and asked my nanny what on earth it was. And she didn't really know. I don't think anybody really knows. And yes, so I'm afraid I dressed up as the Holy Ghost. But I was obviously very intrigued by anything that was, I suppose, I would call it spooky. And then finally, I graduated from Tales of Horror because one day in Oxford, actually, when I was about 14 or 15, in the great Black Rose bookshop, they had a section called Occult, and of course I went straight to that. And there I saw a very big fat book where the author was Sir Oliver Lodge. And of course I knew that he was a great scientist. And his book was called Survival of Man. And I thought that was very intriguing because though I didn't believe in any of the religious dogmas, I still didn't like the idea that when my parents died, that was the end of them, or me, come to that, when my time came. And so I thought I'd read about the survival of man. Well, actually, it was a very thorough survey of the evidence so far stacked up by psychical research, and very fairly pointing out all the alternatives to survival theory, like telepathy and retrocognition and so forth. And I was very impressed by the book and realized this is what I wanted to do. And
you were only 14 or 15?
I think I was 15, yes, more like 15. I remember by the time I took it to my school to read again, I was 15 by that time. And I knew that the society would not be interested in children, so I just stored it up. And when I got to Oxford and looked on the board to see about all these wonderful societies, there was a Society of Psychical Research. And so, of course, I went straight into that and learned a lot, because there were two very knowledgeable postgraduates. I think they both became physics professors in America, Harvard and Chicago, I think. But then they were really running the society, and they knew an incredible amount. Got all the interesting people to come to talk to us. And so that was a very active 3 years. But again, I assumed the SPR wouldn't be interested in just young people like me, postgraduate by that time. And I think it took me about 10 years to realize that ordinary people, and I consider myself an ordinary person, could join the Society for Psychical Research. And well, from there, I think I've never stopped. It's been the main interest of my life.
Before we get into your research, I would like to ask you how you've remained so healthy and alert at 95. I mean, that's an accomplishment. What advice would you give to people?
Oh, I don't think I'd give advice on that. No, I'm afraid I eat what I fancy. It's amazing I'm still alive. And but I haven't eaten meat actually for a long time, about 50 years. And I suppose that must have saved me something. But I'm afraid if you see me at tea time guzzling cakes, you think, why am I still alive? So I don't give advice. And besides, I am falling to pieces. I walk on a stick, and not very far either. I'm not here for long. For one thing, I'm a member of the Euthanasia Society, as it used to be called, and I firmly believe in exiting yourself when you think you're no longer any use.
Do you have longevity genes in your family?
Oh, my mother was quite old, 85, I suppose. No, I think in my half family, because all my cousins are actually half cousins. And yes, they have longevity, but otherwise not. Certainly not my father and brother.
Do you think part of it is that you're curious, as you said, as an Aquarian, and you're motivated by learning?
Um, no, I think it's just the luck of the draw. I mean, very clever, alert, active people get Alzheimer's disease. I don't think you can congratulate yourself on anything. It's the luck of the draw.
Uh, um,
Listen, my memory is not very good, but I don't think I've been afflicted by brain rot.
I don't.
So I'm just sorry for people who are.
I'm asking interviewees about their most difficult challenges and how they've coped, because I
Yes.
think it's of interest to people who are reading the book and seeing the video. What have been the most difficult times in your life?
Oh, I see the times in my life. I thought perhaps you meant difficulties in my psychical research work.
Well,
Uh,
both.
yes. Um, well, now that, I suppose I haven't really had many difficulties. I've had a very nice, soft life. I suppose my greatest difficulty now is really having so little sight. But all the same, I can read print, and I haven't lost any light. The world is bright around me, but I don't see much detail. And, that I find a very big challenge. I still think I'm quite lucky to be seeing as well as I am, considering my severe myopia and various other things. But that certainly has been my greatest challenge to enjoyment of life, yes. And I suppose that's only in the last 3 or 4 years.
What about being interested in psychical research and being a barrister? Did your colleagues think that it was an odd phenomena that you were doing this kind of research?
Well, I think first of all, I must make a bit of a correction about being a barrister. I was a barrister, and with that qualification, I was a legal assistant in a firm of uh, builders, I suppose you would call them, but they were very architecturally minded and a very nice firm. But they ran into difficulties for a time, and I had to leave them. And by that time, I was very used to working locally, not usually as a barrister, but with legal knowledge. And I decided that if I was going to avoid going into London, I would actually have to become a solicitor. And there are these two different branches. We have barristers who give advice and appear in court, and solicitors who do what you might call the dirty work and also appear in the lower courts. And so you can't be both at once. You have to resign from one before you become the other. And I became a solicitor. As a solicitor, I spent quite a lot of time in court, which I had never done as a barrister. And though it sounds a bit sort of down market to be in the lower courts, it is actually a much more interesting and amusing life, because as far as the crime is concerned, you get what I would call the amateur criminals, the very respectable men who don't like a car parked outside their house and scratch it with a key, that sort of thing.
Oh my.
And I find that more interesting, actually, than professional criminals. And when it comes to civil actions, you get people rather than companies. So that actually can be very stimulating and amusing work. And so, really, I suppose I spent more time as a solicitor. And even then, I was only part-time solicitor because the senior partner was what is known as the clerk to trustees of almshouses, and I became his administrator and spent half my time running, almshouses and landed property estates. So I came full circle round to property management, having started off with the idea that I wanted to deal with housing. So it's a very strange career. And so I've always looked on my real career as being in psychical research. I mean, obviously I got paid for my legal work, and it's rather the opposite with psychical research. You do the paying, unless you're a professional parapsychologist, of course, which I wasn't. And so, yes, you can see the strange way I have fallen into doing things in my life.
Doing psychical research, did you also experience phenomena yourself, like synchronicity or ESP or precognitive dreams or any of that kind of phenomena?
Well, no, actually. As I think I used to say to myself, for the first 30 years, I experienced absolutely nothing. And I'm talking about when I joined the London Society. And I suppose actually I'm one of the few people who actually joined entirely because of what I read in books. In other words, I was convinced by the evidence of other people. And it was a very long time before anything ever happened in my life that I could think of as paranormal. And then it was quite exciting, actually. It was some very loud knocks on the back wall of my house where there was a conservatory built. And I had spent the day talking to Anita Gregory, who was a well-known psychical researcher, and we'd been organizing some experiments to be done with the medium and now the healer, Matthew Manning, and we'd been talking about that all day. And then we had tea in the conservatory with, another resident of the house who didn't really like psychical research. For him it was a waste of time and also rather the work of the devil, both of them at once. And so we didn't talk about it, though I suppose we probably both wanted to. And there were these incredible knocks on the wall, as if somebody had sort of taken a sledgehammer and whacked the brick wall. In fact, I was even mad enough to rush inside the house and make sure that nobody was battering on the wall. And so that was a very dramatic thing, which actually I ascribed to someone who I knew wanted to get in touch with me in connection with a legal property problem. And as it was Saturday, I'm afraid I didn't get in touch with her. And she was indeed in a kind of, no, not a trance, but a kind of abstracted state at the time in which she was thinking about her problem and how she would talk about it to me. So I think I attribute it to her rather than to me.
Oh.
Because I don't think I am very paranormal prone. I don't get hunches and telepathic messages. And when I want to meet people, I have an amazing way of missing them. So, no, I am quite convinced of most paranormal phenomena. but without much personal experience.
You wrote a book about Stefan Ossowiecki. How do you say his name, and why did you pick
Well,
him?
we say in the beginning of the book, he is pronounced Ossowiecki, and once you say it, it rolls off the tongue. Stefan Ossowiecki, yes, great Polish clairvoyant. One of the very few people who could be pretty well relied on to demonstrate his clairvoyance. Mostly this such powers as people have are not under control, because that is the hallmark of the paranormal. You don't control it with your conscious mind. I think it's the output of your unconscious, and you're very lucky if your unconscious is prepared to take any notice of what your conscious mind wants. Now, I think he had an extraordinary avenue from his conscious to his unconscious, and he could, if you gave him, what should we say, a token of something you lost, he could be pretty well relied on to tell you where it was. I mean, I think my favorite anecdote about him, but it's very well supported by independent evidence. The wife of a judge, while she was out, she lost a brooch from her coat and went to Ossowiecki, as people did, to say, please, can you find my brooch? And he said, well, where was it when you lost it? And she pointed to the coat. So he asked to put his finger on it. And having put his finger on that place, he immediately described a different brooch. But she said, stop, it's kept in the same box. That's not the one. So he tried again and then said, oh, yes, I see it. Yes, it fell off on the corner of something or other street, and a man with black moustaches picked it up. And I'm afraid I don't know where it is now. Anyway, she knew where she'd lost it. And I think Ossowiecki felt he hadn't really quite done his job because he hadn't found it for her. But next day when he went into his bank, there he saw the man with the black moustaches.
Oh, my.
Yeah, well, I don't think anything happens entirely by mistake, by chance with Ossowiecki. He accosted him and said, yesterday on the corner of whatever street, you picked up a lady's brooch, and where is it, please? And the man was so confounded, he admitted that he had it, and so the lady got back. Well, she is the wife of a judge. That's her story. In Ossowiecki's autobiography, he'll give you a much shorter and less dramatic version of it. And really almost everything he talks about in his autobiography turns out to be verified by some other independent person, usually giving a much more detailed account of it, because I think to him it was just another day.
When did he die? What were his dates?
Well, he was around during the Second World War, helping people who had lost relatives. There were people who came to him, and I think they brought some garment or something belonging to an officer who'd gone missing. And he said, oh, yes, I can take you there. I can show you where he's buried. And he took them to the I think they knew the battleground where a lot of men had been buried. And he came to a place and said, there, and he's underneath another corpse. And they found him, of course, identified by his, well, all sorts of things, probably an identity bracelet or something, but anyway, they knew it was him. And that was actually written by the corpse's sister, I think, one of his relations, in an account to Ossowiecki's widow. So, that's another quite extraordinary thing. But of course, it's routine things. Thing sounds a bit tame after that. People would simply make a drawing or write a few words and put it in an envelope, or probably put something like tinfoil in front of it and hand it to him, and he would simply draw the diagram or reproduce the words. And that, you might say, was a kind of routine performance. Not always envelopes, boxes, and but the really fascinating thing about Ossowiecki didn't give him any brownie points at all. It was that he would describe the scene where the drawing or the words or whatever it is, the thing was put in a box and wrapped up, where it had happened. And that seemed to help him. And he would actually go back and say, yes, I see it all. You were in the third story of a house in something or other street. And yes, I see you. Yes, you're putting this article in the box and wrapping it in green paper and then pink paper. And yes, I see it. And so often, when he couldn't immediately make the drawing, he would do this, imagining it being created. And really, I suppose the conclusion I've drawn from that is that is how clairvoyance is done. You don't see through anything. You see the thing in its original state before it was enveloped and before it had its wrappings and boxing put on. Because this seemed to help him to get to the target, and having done that peeling back time, so to speak, then he was able to tell you what the thing looked like. And there was a very dramatic example of this that was something wrapped up in a box. Now, this was a very informal test done by the French investigator Gustave Gillet. He wrapped up something, and he put various layers of cotton wool and bits of paper around it and put it in a box. And then I think he went on a fishing trip with Ossowiecki. I think it was the same occasion. Anyway, everything was informal. He knew what was in the box. He knew that they'd been fishing. And so it was not a rigorous experiment. If people mumble under their breath or give things away, he certainly didn't. Because what happened was Ossowiecki said, oh, yes, I see. Well, there's some cotton wool that your wife, I see her buying the cotton wool in Marshall Square or something at the pharmacy there. And then, oh, yes, I've come to a layer of thick paper, and now there's a layer of green paper. And now, yes, I see it. But I don't know what it is. It is round and thin and translucent. It's like mica, but I don't know what it is. And he never got further than that. And eventually, Gelée opened the box and took off the cotton wool and the wrappings and showed it to him. And he said, "Oh yes, I saw it, but I don't know what it is." And so Gelée said, "Well, it's a fish scale." So in spite of all those hints and being with the man who had prepared it, he didn't know what it was, but he could see it. And he seems to have seen it by going right back to where it was when it was boxed up.
So you could say he's a remote viewer.
Well, remote in time.
Remote viewers review.
Fascinating time. He didn't really do remote viewing in space. He did it in time by looking at the thing and going back to the time when it was before it was boxed. Or in one case now, Richer gave him a target with he'd written on it, and then he screwed up the paper and put it in his fist. So it was really no longer legible. But Ossowiecki could see it before it was screwed up. And on another occasion, Richer wrote something which, of course, he had to remember and threw it in the fire. And again, Ossowiecki goes back to the point where he actually put the writing on the paper. So I think retrocognition is the most fascinating thing I've ever really been convinced about, because it means that in some sense the past is really still there and can be viewed. It's rather like those block universes that I think some physicists talk about. Seem to think Einstein said past, present and future are the same. But I don't know what he based it on, but I suppose I'm basing it on Ossowiecki's retrocognition.
Do you have any theories as to what mechanism allows someone like him to read the past? Does quantum physics?
I think it's a sort of abnormality, because in one sense we're not designed to do any of that. So I feel it's a kind of a sort of blip, that, some people obviously have an abnormality that is very good. I suppose someone who can do lightning calculations of extraordinary arithmetical sums has a great talent, but all one can say is it's not normal. And so you can have a good abnormality as well as a bad one. And I have an idea that being able to tap into paranormal experience or knowledge is not really, we're supposed to be limited to ourselves and our sensory experience. So it's a bit of leakage into another, I suppose I have to say another dimension, whatever that means, another reality.
Do you think quantum physics, quantum mechanics explains it in any way?
Well, I don't know enough about quantum mechanics, but frankly I rather doubt it. There may be a kind of crossover between fundamental physics and fundamental paranormics, you might say. But I don't know enough to speak about that.
Ian Stevenson was your co-author, and he's famous for his research on children's memories of their previous lives. How did you get in touch with Stevenson in Virginia, and what did you learn about his research?
Well, Stevenson is a great hero as far as I'm concerned. One of the greatest researchers he often used to come to London, and so I got to know that he was interested in Ossowiecki, and so was I. And he put up the idea for the SPR to have Ossowiecki's autobiography translated. And I think I was the only one who showed enthusiasm for this. But actually, in the end, we thought it would be better, really, to write a book about him, not in, using some of the autobiographical material, but mostly using the more independent sort of reports. And I mean, I was really greatly honoured to be with him. But of course, the third person in that was Sophia Weaver, who is Polish, and we couldn't have done without her. I suppose really she and I wrote the book, and Ian Stevenson did the introduction and forward and afterward. And of course, he had entree to the publisher. But yes, I thought he was great, and quite fascinating, the children will remember. Now, I think he really preferred reincarnation as an explanation. I think on the whole I prefer, without being able to justify it, I prefer the idea of overshadowing, that someone from the past, which I suppose is the way I tend to talk about dead people, someone from the past, whether when they were alive or now post-mortem, and don't know, you can't say, influences, wants to live again, I think you might say, and wants to live again through some unformed mind, because that's easier to overshadow and put your memories into and have a new experience of life through that child, who obviously thinks they're his own memories and identifies with the overshadower. So in a sense, I prefer that to thinking that for some reason I, and it's no longer I because they don't remember me, becomes somebody else. I can't see the point in it. You might say one can't see the point in being alive at all, but you are. And the fact that I don't see the point in it doesn't mean it's not a fact. But I don't like it, let's put it like that. I prefer the idea that one person somehow retains that personage, and even though I suppose I theorize that I'm going to become rather like a cell in a much bigger mind, I have an idea that overshadowing can be done by those cells, which are people like you and me, having, I suppose, something rather like lucid dreams in which you remember who you were and try to relive that life. And I suppose that's the state in which you try to overshadow somebody else.
So you believe that the spirit continues after death, but probably isn't reincarnated into another body?
Well, that's what I hope, rather than believe. Well, I obviously don't believe anything and just speculate and think something might be so. I mean, there's some things of which I'm obviously convinced, and you could say I believe, I believe that people have paranormal experiences. I have absolutely no doubt that psychokinesis happens, that telepathy happens. no doubt at all. And so you could say, if you like, that I believe in them, but I believe in them because I'm convinced by the evidence. But when it comes to what happens when you die, well, I can't be either convinced or believe, because you can't know, and in the sense you can interpret the evidence in so many different ways, including, I'm afraid, retrocognition. So that if somebody speaks to a medium and sounds very convincing, it could be the medium has access to knowledge by retrocognition. And these are all sorts of alternatives to evidence for survival. But after all, there is a lot of evidence. But I don't know, who knows?
You've done some research in poltergeists, the noisy ghosts. Do you think those are deceased spirits?
Oh, I don't know. No, I mean, I do think that is initiated by living people. Now, it could be that those living people attract, dead people or even spirits, for all I know, because after all, the mechanism by which, to take one example, I think my favourite one, the Dixon poltergeist, which I dug out of an old proceedings, where there was a 14-year-old girl in her first job as general maid, which was a pretty awful position to be in those days. Yes, late Victoria, early Edwardian. And there were, first of all, there was bells ringing all over the house. And I thought that was very significant because, after all, that's one of the things that ruled her life. If anyone rang a bell, she would probably be the one that had to answer it, because it wasn't a very full household. It didn't have lots and lots of servants. So she would have been made of all the work, so to speak, at the behest of bells. And bells would ring from more than one room at a time, and quite terrified the cook and the maid. And actually the master of the house, who was a fairly youngish man actually, but he ran the school for deaf boys, and the boys boarded in the house up in the attic, and he had taken them all to the circus. So man and boys were out of the house, and it was this empty house where bells started ringing. But in the fullness of time, and again when it was clear that nobody else could be doing it, there was a full poltergeist spectrum of bangs and knocks and furniture piling up and so forth and so on. And in a sense it was all attributed to this girl who, the maid, and he would actually watch her in a state of terror while all this was going on. Now, okay, she was the initiator, and then she was sent home stopped. And so, of course, she came back to work. And it went on for a long time. But where's the mechanism? It's all well to talk about PK moving dice, or even, moving small things. But where, what sort of psychic force rings bells, even in rooms where the bell push doesn't exist? because, it lights up to tell you which room it is ringing, and move furniture. Yes, where does the force come from?
Yeah.
So, I do think it's wide open that it could indeed be external forces. But I'm sure poltergeists happen, yes.
When was the case that you mentioned of the 14-year-old girl? When did that happen?
Oh, now Dixon, when did he die? I think it's about 1900.
Does that relate to, I don't know how you say it, JOTT, things that just move?
Well, yes, of course, it's not my favourite subject. Yes, now actually I have had some jottles myself, though nothing like as exciting as a lot of other people's. But certainly I have had this experience of things that I put in a certain place, and I know that's where I put them, and it's gone. And then I found it in another place that it absolutely shouldn't be. So I have certainly, that's an experience I have had.
And what's an example of something that moved?
Something that relocates.
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of examples of them. Which is the most convincing. This is the most convincing I've had. I suppose I was pretty convinced by my very first bottle. When at work in my desk, in a very definite place in the top left-hand drawer, there was a very uninteresting little red book covered with, shiny red, I suppose. And it was a sort of cash book. And my part-time assistant came to get her wages. And so I said, oh, well, yes, bring me the cash book. And I put my hand in the drawer to get the actual book. And it wasn't there, my hand didn't find it. So I pulled out the drawer, and my eyes didn't find it. And I put my hand, to the back of the drawer, trawled everything that was there. And I looked in the drawer, and I assumed that she did too. She was standing there. And then I looked up at her, and she looked down at me, and I said, then where is it? And then, for some reason, we just turned our eyes back, and there it was, sitting in the drawer. But actually, I can cap that with, one of our council members. He and his wife have computers either side of a sort of common pile of things they might want, which includes, again, I think, a red covered book of names and addresses and telephone numbers. Well, he wanted that book, and so he put his hand out to get it, it lived on top, and it wasn't there. Actually, there wasn't much of a pile there anyway, but anyway, that red book wasn't there. And so he actually went and fetched a sheaf of papers, A4 size, and put them down on the left-hand side where the red book should have been. And he looked up what he wanted from that sheet of papers. And when he'd made his telephone call, he just became aware that something had changed. And he looked to his left, And there was the red book on top of the sheet of papers. Now that was a jottle where a mistake had been made, because if it had come back under the sheet of papers, then he would have said, well, how could I not have seen it, before I put the papers on top? But it came back on top of the papers that he just placed there. So that was a magnificent comeback.
And what might be moving the objects?
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You see, I suppose my basic theory is that there is a mass of material in the world, so to speak, in reality, and that material contains both aspects of mind and matter. And my theory is that when it is in its, what I call its asleep state, it is inert matter and entirely dependent on the mind element, which is awake and alert and joined up, incidentally, rather like water with other mind particles, if you can call them particles, whereas the matter is always separate. I call it the difference between ice and water. They're the same thing in different states. So the mind actually is organizing the matter. And as we are part of that mind, we actually configure the matter to fit with our concept of reality. And our concept of reality, again, is, well, I suppose part of the laws of the way we live, which is that anything that happens must be consistent with anything that precedes it. So everything must be absolutely sequential. And if you follow that system, you get the world around us. And of course it's perfectly stable, because we don't change the past, and the future has to be consistent with it. And that is our normal reality. But I think, though, that when something non-conforming happens, and if it is not sequential, it's paranormal, and if it is sequential, it's not paranormal. But if something non-sequential happens, then it's a kind of failure, in some sense, of your, really your, what do I call it, command, basic command to keep things sequential. It means you have failed to keep things sequential. And that's when you get a jottle. Of course, you can go much further down this route by holding a seance and deliberately flouting the law of sequentiality. And then, of course, you get all chaos breaking out, as you would if you went to a seance with Indri and Vedasan, or with our very own P.D. Hume. You could get chaos and breakdown. Even with the Golika circle, you could get chaos and breakdown. So, I mean, that is a deliberate attempt to break down the normal reality. But of course, most of us are not capable of that, even though it would be rather fun.
So you think it's not some kind of entity moving the red books around? It happens through some kind of consciousness shift?
Well, I mean, I think it can be inadvertent. It can be failure to concentrate. That is, concentrate your subconscious mind on what it should be doing. And sometimes it might be that it wants to blot something out for your advantage. Now, I don't know what advantage it could be to my friend not to have found the red book he was looking for. I don't know. I don't know. Perhaps bringing the sheaf of papers gave him an idea he wouldn't have had if he hadn't had to do that. So now that I cannot tell. But I think sometimes you put something out of existence because it would be good for you. Now people are always having this experience with reading glasses, and they sometimes find them in the most bizarre place.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's easy. You know, you're reading too much, you're working too much. And then appointment books go missing too. You're too busy. There's the woman who found her appointment book rather by chance at the bottom of the garden, underneath a bit of garden refuse. Well, she didn't put it there. Why should anyone else put it there? But I think it was telling her she was too busy. And then the woman who came out into the garden in November with a surveyor who wanted to look up at the roof actually found her missing reading glasses sort of hanging on a tree. And again, not the sort of thing you would do in the middle of winter, or probably not at any time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I think when things go missing, sometimes it's because it's good for you, or it may teach you something. It's I don't know. I think your subconscious can do things to you that that your conscious is not very keen to have done. But either it's because you really want it in some way, or because it does something for you that you wouldn't have done for yourself.
So it's a function of mind, not of an entity.
Oh, I think so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You worked on committees that investigated spontaneous cases. What are spontaneous cases?
Oh, well, I suppose anything that's not experimental, things that just happen to people. I mean, my knocks on the wall were spontaneous cases, and so it's, yes, indeed, it's poltergeist, haunting, telepathy. Well, certainly telepathy counts, and again, I think I don't know anyone with, now do I? I think one of my favourite telepathy things is the H.M. Stanley, the explorer. Not the sort of person you'd think fanciful or making things up. He suddenly knew that his old nanny had died. And indeed she had, just at the time he knew about it. And I think to myself, it can't be coincidence. That is just too much. You know, people are dying all the time, it's true. But, you know, if you get the person who in your childhood meant something to you, and you get that message exactly at the right time. But of course, there are lots of persons who is just like this. I mean, I knew a girl who said, I think I told her about some jottles, and she said, oh, well, nothing funny ever happens to me. And then she thought about it, and said, oh, well, there was something. I think more dramatic than has ever happened to me. She was giving a lecture, and about 10 minutes before it was due to stop, she suddenly knew that something awful had happened at home. and she wanted to telephone home. And so she got through her lecture as quickly as possible and rushed to the telephone, telephoned her mother, and she simply said, "What's happened?" And the mother said, "Oh, well, he's all right. He's not been hurt, but the car is a write-off." And it was her brother who had crashed a car. And I think that is very typical of telepathy. You don't know what has happened, but actually the most urgent message you can get is that something has happened. And in fact, Louisa Rhine, who wrote so very interestingly about spontaneous cases of that sort, she said that if you get a lot of detail, you think to yourself, "Oh, that's fantasy." I'm daydreaming. But if you get some kind of urgent message that says, "Go somewhere, do something," something has happened, then you take it. It's much more powerful message. She wrote about a woman who was cooking a meal to be ready for, I think, half a dozen children who were playing on the coast and would be coming back to eat it. Now, if you're cooking an elaborate meal, the last thing you want to be told is drop everything and go somewhere else. But she got the message. I don't know if you can call it a message. She just knew that she had to go as quickly as possible to the coast where she was needed. And so she dropped everything and went to the coast where she found a child in difficulty halfway up a cliff. And, she was able to a rescue. And, that was one of Louisa Rhine's examples of a message that told you nothing except you had to do something.
What about your book about research published this year, talking about psychical research? Tell us about that book.
Oh, well, that is a collection of talks that I've given over the years. I think I've really done more talking than writing. Well, as far as the SPR is concerned, I suppose. And, the ones that I've given since I got a computer, and that was perhaps relatively late in life, they're still, of course, on the disk. Others have disappeared into space. They're recorded somewhere in our library. I thought I'd get them together and see if I could make a book out of them. Rewriting some of it and certainly bringing some of it up to date, rather improving on ideas I had a few years ago. And so there it is, a collection of talks. And I suppose it does culminate in the, I still think of it as a talk, but I suppose it's a chapter on psychic force, in which, I think among other things, I rope in, you might say, telepathy into the class of physical phenomena, because I say to myself, we pay an awful lot of attention to the person who receives a telepathic message. But after all, somebody is the initiator of that message. And why don't we pay more attention to the initiator? And in fact, I came to the conclusion that really it's the initiator who's probably doing all the work. And again, via the subconscious, because we don't know how to send telepathic messages. we try in experimental work, we try concentrating, we try thinking, we try gazing, in anything. But actually you have no idea what you're doing or why you're doing it. So I reckon actually if messages, and as we call them messages, get sent from A to B, remotely, it is actually the unconscious mind of the sender that's doing all the work. And I suppose I speculate that what they're doing is a remote form of PK. They have somehow got onto your tuned circuit, and they are actually impinging on your mind. Now, whether it goes through the brain, I don't know, and that is rather a problem for me. But it's certainly the end result is it impinges on your mind, and you become aware of this thing that the sender has sent to you. Though sent and message is really, I think, the wrong thing. It's more a case of exteriorizing your state of mind in such a way through PK that it impinges on the state of mind of the person receiving it, and they become aware of what is in your mind, and in all sorts of ways. I mean, it might be information, or it might be hallucination. But I suppose one thing that I've convinced myself about is that the things, the telepathic material that really travels best are commands. Now that fits in with Louisa Rhine's dictum that really telling people to do something is more effective than giving them information that might lead to them doing it. It doesn't tell you there's a child halfway up a cliff and you better go and rescue it. It just tells you go. And I suppose I come to the conclusion from reading about experiments carried out in France with hypnotists. And these were actually witnessed by Frederick Myers, who wrote them up in early editions of the proceedings. And they were more successful, I would think, as telepathic transmissions than any other experiments I've ever read about, which, to my mind, if they succeed at all, might easily be clairvoyance rather than telepathy. But these were telepathically delivered commands made by hypnotists to servants who were simply roped in the subject. But of course servants were used to obeying orders, and so the successful experiments were telepathically delivered orders. Sometimes do something quite ridiculous, like open the windows when it's snowing, or something. And if a well-trained and subdued servant is told to do something ridiculous, I suppose they will try to do it.
Did the
and
servants
then try to justify it too.
did the
But
servants
they worked.
excuse me,
I
did
mean,
the servants know that they were to receive these commands?
They knew that Professor something must have been up to his tricks again when they realized what they'd done.
Oh, so they didn't
Yes.
know beforehand.
They did know that this might happen, yes, because I suppose they were used and reused, and so they knew that this sort of thing might happen. And the thing is that these telepathic experiments worked, and most telepathic experiments don't work, but these work like clockwork. So I suppose I deduce from that what travels best are orders, and that fits in with the model of PK. It also fits in with what you might call remote healing, and after all, there are cases of, certainly people have said, I suddenly feel better when a remote healer is trying to do his job. And I reckon hypnosis and healing and PK are all interrelated. That probably they are all really psychic force. Of course, really, I don't know that there is an accepted theory of hypnosis. And I think that quite a lot of things are consistent with it being a form of psychic force.
So that means that thoughts have some kind of power.
Yes, in other words, it's this mixture of physical and mental that I think come together in the material of our reality.
Mm-hmm. So that explains why someone can do voodoo and cast a spell and the person gets ill because thoughts have power.
Yes, because it is, you can't separate, in my view, you can't separate mind from matter. I mean, the idea that mind exists without matter is, in a sense, rather strange. You know, it's mind that exists in a vacuum. And so it could be that mind and matter are inextricably together, and that you can't have mind without matter, and matter is always can be in a different state when it's mind.
A lot of people are using the word consciousness to talk about what I think you call mind. What do you think of consciousness?
Oh well, yes, I suppose I do mean mind, but of course, I suppose I mean mind in a rather larger sense, not just your conscious mind.
Not your brain.
Your conscious mind is just you, I think, but you're underneath is the seething unconscious that knows so much more, and for all I know is a kind of universal pot of telepathy. I mean, obviously, I can't imagine that your unconsciousness holds the telepathy of the universe. No, but I mean, I think there must be a network of people with whom you're in tune, in the same group almost, you might say, and probably you have lots of telepathic knowledge seizing in your unconscious that never gets anywhere near your conscious mind because you know you have a natural valve that stops it.
Yeah, some people call it a filter. The brain works like a filter.
A filter.
Right.
Yes, I think the filter makes sense.
When you've heard skeptics say that psi phenomena is based on hallucination or fraud, what do you think are their best arguments that psi phenomena really doesn't exist?
Well, I think that can only be held by people who are not prepared to look at the evidence. You know, I don't know how any reasonable person could look at the evidence and say there's no such thing. I mean, either you won't look at it, or you look at it but don't take it in for some reason. I mean, obviously there must be some people so averse to it that they just won't consider it. You know, they just feel, for one thing, that it's anti-scientific, and you know, that is a kind of sacrilege these days. But, I mean, it's just non-scientific. It's not unscientific. Because I suppose science is based entirely on sequentiality. And it doesn't cope with that non-sequentiality at all. It's not equipped for it, and it shouldn't pronounce on it. And, people who are very expert in some other field and have not seriously looked at the evidence for the paranormal, they shouldn't pronounce on it. Though they do.
What I'm switching gears now to ask you, what do you do for amusement, for fun, for charging your batteries?
Well, when I had better sight, and also when a lot of people who are now dead were alive, I used to play string quartets. That, I suppose, is one of the high points of my life.
What instrument?
The cello. And singing in a choir, that's been another, but of course, lighter things. I mean, in my younger days, very young days, games and tennis and riding. Well, riding actually, on and off during my life, I've always enjoyed. I had a pony when I was a sport child, and that's, yes, I think of the non-intellectual things in my life, that has been the greatest. And, well, I'm pretty potty about animals anyway, dogs and cats. But my pony, yes, I hope when I have crossed to the other side, I can find my pony.
Well, they people with near-death experiences report dogs and cats, so I don't know why you didn't have a pony.
Well, again, I think maybe you have lucid dreams, which you go back. I like to think that if they're there, you've activated them so that they're experiencing it too. I mean, lots of things one likes to think without really being able to believe, but hope.
You have perspective that others of us don't have, living as long. Do you think that things socially, politically, environmentally have gotten worse or better? And are you an optimist or a pessimist about the future?
Well, I think the good news is that medicine and dentistry have definitely got better. As for other things, well, yes, I mean, I think we don't have such bad poverty, at least in this country, as we had, I suppose, when I was younger, though I didn't really know anything about it. And, I suppose probably from most old people's perspective, things have got worse. Because even though it's wonderful that you can send emails, without having to write addresses on envelopes and put on stamps and wait for answers, it's a wonderful convenience. On the other hand, you do feel they've done a lot of harm, when you see people glued to their telephone screens. And the same with all these things that are wonderful. Wonderful to be able to drive your car, to remote beauty spots. They were probably spoiling them. Yes, I suppose it's difficult to say. I've no doubt the people who are living now wouldn't have wanted to live through the 40s and 50s, and I suppose even 60s, especially in the 30s. that I enjoyed more, I suppose. But I suppose they were, to my mind, nicer. I suppose there were fewer people. There weren't any cars, or very few of them. There were not so many houses, more open space, more gardens. It's, if you look at an old map of the area where you live, or at least where I live, you think to yourself how wonderful it was, 50, 100 years ago. But again, I suppose it was lovely for some people, but not so good for others. So, I'm thinking back from the perspective of someone who's had a comfortable life and probably, in my book, lived a bit too long.
Why do you say that?
Well, you do see yourself falling to pieces. My memory isn't very good. When you ask me about poltergeists and the Juttles, I really have to think hard to, yes, what were the best ones or the ones worth talking about. So, oh yes, if you live long enough, you do begin to, yes, you're not what you were, and you know it.
So are you optimistic or pessimistic in the face of climate change and increasing numbers of, like Boris Johnson being picked as your prime minister? That's not encouraging.
Oh well, I mean, it does make me sad to, leave life when my country, I feel, is going down the drain, because I wanted to stay in the European Union.
Yeah.
And I feel that our country is going to be wrecked and Europe is going to be diminished. I think it's all very tragic. And so, yes, I am sad about that, but still, there it is. I just hope that things recover. Yes, it's a sad thing to say, but I think people of my generation actually feel rather sorry for the next generation. But let's hope we're wrong.
Is there anything else that you think should be in a book about psi research or a new paradigm of doing science? Anything that we haven't talked about?
Oh, I think we've talked pretty thoroughly. I don't think I've got any great new ideas. No, I think I've probably said enough.
Thank you.